Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine and I have a recipe to share with you today. We are in the middle of our Silk Road main lesson block for homeschool and we're finding a lot of inspiration from this book called The Silk Road Gourmet by Laura Kelly. I love adding recipes when we're doing our history units and today we're going to work on this recipe called chickpea and dill rice pilaf. The first thing we're going to do is soak our rice in some filtered water. I'm using about 2 cups of basmati rice. I am doubling the recipe, but you can find the original recipe on my website at pepperandpine.com. So I have cooked about 16 ounces of dry chickpeas, but we actually only need 16 ounces of cooked chickpeas, so we're going to have some extra chickpeas when we're done. Next, I'm going to juice 2 lemons. I want to get about 4 tablespoons of lemon juice, and we end up with a little bit extra, so I'm going to measure that out and put that aside while we work on the rest of this recipe. And I am keeping those kitchen scraps for my compost bin. Next, we're going to cut up about 4 to 5 cloves of garlic. We are doubling this recipe, but I did throw in an extra clove of garlic as well, since we love our garlic. Our garlic masher only recently broke, so I'm just going to finely chop this up with my knife. And this is going to get cooked down anyway, so it's not super fine, but it is good enough for this recipe. So we're going to set that aside and get the rest of our ingredients. Now the recipe does call for fresh dill, but I'm using some dried dill. Next, we're going to slice up 2 onions. Again, I'm going to keep those kitchen scraps for our compost bin. This is going to make up the base of our rice. So we're going to saute it with some olive oil. I'm adding quite a bit of olive oil to coat the entire bottom of our pan. Then we're going to add those 2 onions to it, and we want to get them nice and translucent. So while that is cooking, we're going to be working on the rest of the ingredients, but you do want to keep an eye on this. You don't want to burn your onions. Next, we're going to dice up 2 tomatoes. Now, these tomatoes are pretty large, and I do love tomatoes, and I would totally even double what the recipe is calling for, but my children aren't huge fans of tomatoes, so 2 are just enough to add flavor to the recipe and cook down enough so that it's not too noticeable. So now that the onions are sauteing and looking pretty good, it's time to drain and rinse our rice. So I have a strainer inside a larger bowl and I'm going to strain that rice. I'm adding more water and just getting it from the sink. Now typically I would just rinse it in the sink a couple of times. Now I'm going to set that aside and let it drain completely in another bowl while we add our garlic to our onions. You can see they're getting a little bit overcooked there. I'm adding the tomatoes as well. I'm going to stir those all in together. It's smelling amazing. I'm adding the salt and the dill as well as the lemon juice. Going to stir that all up and reduce the temperature just a little bit. It's time now to add 16 ounces of our cooked chickpeas and 1 to 2 cups of chicken broth. And if you want to make this vegan, you can just add vegetable broth. We're going to mix that all in, and next we're going to coat the top layer with some rice. So we just want to have it on a nice even layer at the top. And now all of those juices and the chicken broth or the vegetable broth are going to steam the rice. So you want to keep an eye on this and add more chicken broth or vegetable broth as the cooking continues. You want to check on it periodically to make sure that it's not too moist, and that if the water has evaporated, that you add a little bit more liquid in order to cook that until it just gets to be a little bit more than al dente. You don't want to overcook your rice in this recipe. You do want to keep it just a little bit on the almost undercooked side, but you don't want it crunchy at all. So it does require a little bit of care and observation, and having those onions and garbanzo beans at the bottom really ensure that it's not going to burn. And it is amazing in the end. This turned out to be one of our favorite rice dishes. It is very flavorful, it's very hearty, and yet at the same time it still has a lightness to it. We would pair this with a simple chicken dish or vegetable dish, but I ended up making 2 recipes from the Silk Road Gourmet that maybe aren't intended to be together, but my family still loved it. You can see that orange flavored chicken in the background, and putting both kind of a sweet dish with a savory dish actually worked really well. It was a nice, warming, delicious recipe. It happened to be raining the day that I made this and really cold, and this was just perfect for our lunch, which is our main meal of the day. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. You can find more details on the ingredients that I used on the blog post that accompanies this video. You can also check out that chicken dish that went along with this rice recipe by tapping on the screen right now. That link is also in the description box below. And if you'd like to see what we're eating and how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.